Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about Newfoundland. Newfoundland is pretty neat, and I'm pretty sure it's just the best province. It's the coolest. And if you think otherwise, you're just wrong. You have the wrong opinion. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. Right, let's get into it. What is Newfoundland and Labrador? Where is Newfoundland and Labrador? Well, that's an easy question. Newfoundland and Labrador is the easternmost province of Canada, and it is also the edge of the Maritimes. And it is not a hyperbole to say this, it is the rockiest province in Canada. Why? Because it is the intersection between the Canadian Shield and the Appalachian Mountains, which means that I'm not kidding here, it's almost entirely alpine. This gets me into my first section, the terrain. Now, almost all of Newfoundland and Labrador, as I said, is mountain and alpine region. Let me show you. Okay, look at this first highlighted section here in the gray. Those are the long-range mountains. They're pretty neat. They're pretty rocky, the alpine. This second section right here, pretty big, covers a lot of the province. Oh, that's the Canadian Shield. Anyways, up here, Torngat Mountains. That's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. More mountains, more rock. Always love it. You love to see it. Down here, that's the Appalachian Mountains. More mountains. I'm loving it. Oh, and then right here, guess what that is? Oh, no, that's just more Canadian Shield. Now, all this mountainous terrain leads to some of the coolest rock formations you'll ever see in your entire life. And that leads me to my next section. Cool stuff you love to see. Now, because of the fact that Newfoundland is rocky as heck, there are some things in Newfoundland you will not find in any other province in Canada. I'm talking coastlines that have cliffs that go straight down, hundreds of feet straight into the ocean. It is insane. And then these coastlines, they look like something out of a fantasy novel. I'll show you. Look at them. This is insane. This looks like it's out of Lord of the Rings. If that doesn't put Newfoundland at the top spot just for terrain, I'd be amazed. So now, let's look at things that aren't terrain. Let's look at some of that architecture. You want to know the best thing about some of this architecture? Those rocks, people live on them. Like, just look at these houses. It's in a cliff. Right, like, look at all of these buildings. There's so many of them built on cliffs. Right, but okay. Let's say you're some kind of weirdological being who doesn't want to see these once-in-a-lifetime experiences of amazing houses and towns built into cliffs. Okay, we got you. We'll handle you. Colonial buildings? We got them. Gothic revival churches and architecture? Damn, you know it. Oh, and what's that? Viking ruins? Oh yeah, you know we got you. Come to Newfoundland. You know you want to. No other place has literal Viking ruins. Let us also talk about the history of Newfoundland, okay? Let us just get into it. Here, I'll transfer you off to Other Me to explain the great history of Newfoundland and why it's much more interesting than every other province in Canada. The modern history of Newfoundland began in roughly the year 1000 AD, when a Viking expedition traveled to Newfoundland and set up a colony in the area that they knew as Vinland. Today, that area is known as the Lanso Meadows, and can be visited today, and it still has Viking ruins. This Viking colony, as you can probably guess, did not last forever, and after a large amount of inclement weather, bad harvests, and the inability to find food, coupled with the fact that native tribes were constantly raiding them, was dissolved and abandoned, and the Vikings returned home. It wouldn't be until 500 years after the Vikings had left the island that Newfoundland would finally be rediscovered by Europeans. In 1496, John Cabot rediscovered the island after he landed in Cape Bonavista and set up a small colony there. Then, in 1583, a man by the name of Sir Humphrey Gilbert, under orders from the Queen herself, Queen Elizabeth I, landed in St. John's and took formal possession of the island in the name of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I. This was the formal beginning of the British Empire. Yeah, that's right. Newfoundland was where the British Empire was born. Take that, Ontario. Now, it was not all well and good after the British had taken formal control of the island and established their empire, as there were a lot of wars that happened afterwards, and Newfoundland exchanged hands about a half dozen times, between English to French to Portuguese to Spanish to French to English again. Newfoundland would become firmly under British control in 1710 after the conquest of Acadia, when the French lost all of their overseas territories in North America, except for a couple of small islands. Newfoundland remained a colony of the British Empire until 1907, when, shortly before World War I, it was given Dominion status by the British Empire. Newfoundland was hit especially hard after the First World War, and after a large amount of crippling war debt and added expenses from infrastructure projects caused the government to capitulate, the government voted itself out of existence and lost its Dominion status. After two very close referendums and the passing of another British North America Act, in March 31st, 1949 at midnight, Newfoundland finally joined Canada as the last province to do so. Now we have to talk about the culture of Newfoundland and Labrador. The main group of people is Newfies. That seems pretty self-explanatory. They're Newfoundlanders, they're islanders. They're usually English, Scottish, Irish descendants who are usually Protestant or Catholic. They are tough-willed, stubborn, easygoing when they're not on the job, and that is the stereotypical islander. It seems pretty close to people in Saskatchewan, just with a really much stronger accent and a love for fish. One of their traditions, for example, is screeching in. Probably heard about it, probably remember it. You go to a pub, a non-islander. They start the screeching in ceremony. You are given a shot of very cheap, very highly alcoholic rum known as screech, and a cod. You say the words that are given to you, usually completely unintelligible. You down that bitter-tasting drink. You kiss the fish, and congratulations, you are now an honorary islander. Now that's the main culture group, and they make up the vast majority of Newfoundland and Labrador. Newfoundland and Labrador, 92% of its population lives in Newfoundland, and that's why Labrador has barely been mentioned, because Labrador is so sparsely populated. That's why most people don't think of Labrador. But what if I told you that there is a very large minority in Labrador, so large that they have their own special administrative zone, a province within a province that was granted to them, the Inuit. The Inuit have their own sub-province within Newfoundland and Labrador, known as Nunatsiavut, which means literally our beautiful land. And while it may only be sentimental value, it does show that there are voices other than just Newfies being represented in Newfoundland and Labrador. But I will close this video now, release you guys from the torment of hearing my voice continuously, and let you go. But just remember, Newfoundland and Labrador has an amazing history, has an amazing landscape, has amazing landmarks you can't see anywhere else. And it has an amazing culture. If it's not the best province in Canada, which it is damn well better than Ontario, and that is for sure.